Conversations with my daughters, the intergenerational makings of daughters. These are not actors. This is real time, raw, passionate.
Conversations show women healing themselves. Conversation dares to say that mothers and daughters must speak honestly to one another,
no matter how painful or uncomfortable. Conversations.
Hey, heard you were up all night, thinking about how your world ain't right, and you wonder if things will ever get better. And you're asking, why is it always raining on you, when all you want is just a little good news, instead of standing there stuck out in the weather. Oh, don't hang your head, it's gonna end. God's right there, even if it's hard to see him. I promise you that he still cares. When the waves are taking you under, hold on just a little bit longer. He knows that this is gonna make you stronger, stronger. The pain ain't gonna last forever, and things can only get better. Believe me, this is gonna make you stronger, gonna make you stronger.
Good afternoon, Tampa Bay. I'm Amina Well Wilson, and this is Conversation with Your Daughters. We're here today again with our guest, our executive producer, Melina J. Briggs, and she's here today we were discussing before the show to continue our conversation from last week about who she is and what her interests are in the Tampa Bay area. We were talking a little before the show, and you were mentioning to me about you wanting to delve into the dark side. Can you explain what the dark side of you might be?
Yes, like we were saying before, the dark side, there's always a dark side, and when I say dark side, that's the uncomfortable things that have we talked a little bit about it in the prior show,
right.
Of things, my low self-esteem.
Right.
But that drives you to a dark side of your personality that will make you make the wrong decisions, that will push you toward God because you'll pray more. But the dark side with myself is things happened and I wasn't comfortable. And as I look back on my life, what brought me to conversations is I felt a need to talk. Mm-hmm. I felt that somehow inside of me was this child that needed to grow up. And when I saw when my mother was dead and gone, mm-hmm. There was no longer this great shadow over all of us, and we were all grown people with children and some of us grandchildren, but we were all like little children tucking her in that coffin. And and to me that was a dark place because we were all left with these vacancies inside of ourselves, and now my mom and dad both were gone, and we were the elders. And so today, when I was saying that earlier, I was saying to make a complete person, then you have to look at who is this total woman, who drove me to Jesus Christ? What kept me in a marriage that was very, very abusive,
volatile,
and what made me escape into periods of periods of make believe in my mind. What would do that? What would do that? You're escaping something. You're escaping what's uncomfortable.
But why do you feel the need to discuss this, such an intimate part of who you are, and the dark side of who you are, to such an open audience?
Because I feel very strongly that there's a whole group of people, a whole group of women, that when I see them and somebody's cursing them out, or somebody's walking ahead of them in a store, and they're very uncomfortable, they're tugging at their clothes, or they're stuck in a job, they don't really want to be there. Mm-hmm. I feel like if I become a voice, and enough voice to say, hey, it's okay, you don't have to stay there. If here I am, and God blesses this show to reach a number of women, I would hope that at some point those women will write, and they'll say, it was good to hear you say that because that's how I felt. And so many times, nobody speaks for them.
Okay, and not to cut you off, but in talking about your dark side, what would be considered your darkest moment in your existence?
The darkest moment in my existence, I think, came when I realized that I didn't have to be there.
Explain what you mean. You didn't have to be where?
Okay, I didn't have to be unhappy.
Okay.
And I had been unhappy so long.
Okay.
And I was very angry with God at that moment. And I'm like, why? Now I realize at first you're real happy. And it doesn't happen. It happens different for all of us that have come out of that tunnel, that dark tunnel, and you are in the light now, and you're like, oh, today it's okay. Wow. You know, you look at your face in the mirror. I really did all these things, and your mouth is okay. You start looking for things on yourself that's okay. You see that I'm not a bad-looking lady, and all your life you felt you really were. You're even comfortable with being slightly overweight. You don't see it slightly overweight. You're happy in that moment. And then you look back and you go, you know what, why didn't this happen when I was 30? I'm 31. Why am I, and actually for me it happened when I was 59. And it's an ongoing battle. It's an ongoing battle. And because every day you still got to deal with her. And once more I go to my church and I'm Sister Briggs. Sister Briggs fine. Sister Briggs is really, she laughs, she hugs people. Then there's Valina. Valina is the person who looks at herself and goes, I could lose a little weight here. And that takes you back. That takes you back to that period of time when you're critiquing yourself first, when you're not quite good enough.
But is that necessarily a dark side, or is it real life? Because it's normal to look at yourself and see the things that you don't like, but does that necessarily mean you're in a dark place when you do that?
Well, and that's one of the things I want to do on the show too. I'd love to have a therapist or a pastor, someone sitting here, so it represents both sides, the natural and the spiritual. I think it shouldn't, but for someone with low self-esteem, someone who already entered life feeling less than, you look at yourself, you're not going to see. It's okay to critique yourself if you're going to try to fix it. And I'm not talking about drastic plastic surgery or anything. I'm just saying, well, you know what? I think I want to lose weight because my heart's bad. And, just be good for me because I love myself.
Right.
I'm doing it because I love myself.
Right.
I'm not doing it to get someone's attention.
Right.
I'm not doing it so that somebody else says, and I'm not talking about a man or anything. I'm not doing it so I won't come in the back of the room and stand against the wall. And I've done that a lot in my life. I didn't want to be put in the center because I'm like, oh God, they're going to see how awful I look. But I had already decided I was awful to look at. So it's a dark side then. It's a light when you're doing it. Goes, you know what, girl, you better get up. You love yourself too much to look like this. You love yourself too much to eat all this stuff. Get a little exercise, drink a little water, because you care about yourself. That's the difference I feel between the dark side and the light side.
But now I'm not sure you answered my question. So for you, the darkest side was when you realized you didn't have to be?
Because at that moment, the darkness weighed in. It dawned on me that I had escaped such a really dark place, that there was all this light. There was all this wonderful time. There was all this wonderful world. And I had spent all of my time hiding. I had spent, I'll give you an example. My children when I look at them now, there are times I get really emotional. Because I said, you know what, they were such cute little kids. Those were the kids that you would just take to the park. And I said, they were so precocious. And I said, they dealt with a mom that was halfway there and halfway not there. I was always trying to fix something. So I didn't give them the attention I felt they needed because of all of my baggage. I was so busy trying to patch me or trying to fix me or perpetrating a fraud that I didn't see the beauty of these little kids around me. I said, I'm pretty good, because when I hear them talking, they really think I was on top of it. And I was really on top of going to work. I was on top of all that, but I wasn't on top of being a mom.
What would have made you? Because as your daughter, I see that totally differently, but in your eyes, what would have made you feel like you would have been on top as we see you rather than what you see? Because I ask you this because I remember you taking time to make sure we got into magnet schools. We did we had clothes, we had food to eat. You made sure we did our homework. You were there. If there was something at school, you went. I mean, I don't understand. Maybe the bar is set a little high in your mind, but if we're coming to you saying you were this, why is that not good enough?
Because I guess what I wanted was all of the kids, and I have you, who would always say, Mom, you know, you were the best mom, and you would want to be around me. Then I look at it, and I'm talking about when you guys are grown up. And when I look at my other kids, and those are some of the clips that we'll be showing when we talk about mothers, daughters confronting moms. And that's basically what I'm leading into today, is that, and this is my last segment of the show, and just because I took it to me first, daughters confronting moms, is that even when you talked about it and compared to your two sisters, they were so angry, both of them. They saw it totally different. They saw themselves being left out, abused, and what the clips that I'll try to introduce today is that you see that anger. You see that you left me. You weren't there for me. Whereas here I have the youngest daughter saying, you know, you didn't leave me. When you did leave, you had to leave. You know?
Well, I think it's a gift being the youngest, because I think a lot of times we don't want to take responsibility for our choices. And that's where I differ with a lot of all of my siblings, is that, you know, we all have to be accountable for who we are as adults. And even as children, you know, or as young adults, there were decisions made in our household by my siblings that they still will not take responsibility for. And they tend to put them on you. I refuse to do that. And we were given an opportunity. You sent us to some of the best schools. My two oldest siblings went to one of the most prestigious private schools in San Francisco and blew it. You know, decided to run around and act. I, being the youngest, was given a gift by God, and that is to witness and watch those who came before me and learn from them. And that's what I did. By the grace of God, I was able to do that. But I'm very, very at odds with my siblings on that topic, because I just feel like we grew up in the same house, but how could we see the world so differently? In regards to you, because I think a lot of times you become the scapegoat when a lot of accountability needs to be put on our own shoulders.
Okay, and I do so appreciate that, and in my life you've many times been the balance that kept me from totally going off the end. Because when as a parent, you can't go back and fix anything. You can only go ahead. As you are a mom now, you've got 5 kids.
Yes.
And that's the most important thing, is when I said dark side, try to diminish. Like I remember your kids telling me one time, you don't want to see her twin. And I was laughing, and then later on I was thinking about that. I said, oh. And they said, no. And you said, you don't want her to arrive. I said, uh-oh. You know. But with you guys, what would happen? And I appreciate that, and that's why in doing conversations with my daughters and taping, I taped all of you separately. So, and I'd ask the same questions.
Right.
And so that's what I want our audience to see, how separately you brought up in the same house. You had the same junk hitting you, a dysfunctionalness, a Vietnam War veteran, a father coming back with all kind of stuff. He got his baggage. I got my baggage, low self-esteem. I'm being a battered wife syndrome. And all of you experienced this.
Right.
But you all came out of it with different stories.
But did we? Because I always take another look at that, because I feel like the oddball. My siblings share so many similarities in the choices they've made, the decisions they've made, and I just feel like in no way am I tooting a horn or anything. I just feel like in a lot of ways they gave up, and they took the easy way out, and they may be offended, but it's just the way I feel. You know, we were all given the same opportunity. We all were in school. We all had the opportunity to go to school, sit in the class, and learn. You know. And graduate and do whatever you have to do, no matter what was going on in our household. I mean, there are other situations, and I've read in the paper, and you see it all over the place, where children go through much worse than what we went through and become lawyers, doctors, and add so much more to the world, because they don't let their upbringing define their life. You know, they break the circle. And I think in a lot of ways, you know, it was a scapegoat. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to go to school. I don't want to go to school. And this is why. And I just think it's a crock. You have to take responsibility for your life, whether you are 16 or 25. You have to take responsibility. You know, you couldn't come run behind all of us and make sure we were all in school. Your job was to get us there, and you dropped us off each day, and you picked us up. Now, what we did in those hours was our responsibility.
Okay, but as we explore it, as I look at it, the one thing I did when I started this, and you reminded me, you said I came to all of you because, of course, I'm trying to deal with all of this stuff in me around my mom, around her death, around who I was.
Right.
And I came to you and I said, okay, I want to do this. I want to film you guys. I said, if you, I don't remember the exact words, but I trust that you do. You said to me just earlier, you said if you, I want you guys to support me in this. And many of you didn't want to do it. But then
I took big reservations with it because I'm not open. I don't feel like I have to put my emotions on display. I live my life and I live what I believe. So sitting down and talking and telling, you know, reliving the past to me is pointless because the future is so much bright and you learn from it, you move on. If you get caught up in talking about it over and over again, you'll stay there.
Right, and I agree with you to that degree, but if we do not converse, if we don't talk, we're blessed. There's a big part that we're leaving out.
What's that?
You know, and that's Christ.
Without a doubt. I didn't leave him out.
But if we did not have him and all of that madness,
and
all of the madness at the end of the day, and I know there are biological family members on my side who says that's a crock. They say I hide in my religion. They can say what they want, but it's that.
It's a great place to hide.
It's a great place to hide, and it's not religious.
Right.
Because being in him helped me. Christ helped me. Even through therapy, Christ helped me when my daughter died. He said, okay, because I'm going to a therapist. I hate God. God killed my daughter, and I was really angry. I was really angry.
You said all that stuff?
Yeah, I was mad. And I said, you know, how can he let her die at 6 years old? Mm-hmm. How can he let her die? And then I had my husband, who had always been, not always, that's not fair, because he and I both belong to this marriage as a union, and you all put your stuff in. You know, you all share and things. Some share more, some share less, but you share.
Right.
And so just using that point to go back to your point, my anger at God, not believing him, but it helped me get through one of the most painful periods in my life is to lose a child. You lose it. And to lose Emerald that way. Mm-hmm. And then to end up in therapy. I wouldn't go to church. I got mad. I just said, forget it. I'm not going to church. You guys in here, because you were little, you were like 3. And, but I'm sure you could feel it. Mm-hmm. Because I go in that room and I start working. Right. I just type. I would type so much. I could write a play in a weekend. But if I read the play wrong, I would have you guys typed into it, saying, hey, Mommy, we want something out the kitchen. That's how focused my mind was. And what I learned in doing that was that I could escape. But as long as I stayed at that typewriter and that little, if you remember, the room wasn't that lit, but it had a window.
Right.
And you guys could stand at that window and just talk to me. And some of my best work flowed out through that. But it was the death of Emerald who brought a lot of that about. I was doing it anyway, but when she died, I escaped into a world of make-believe. And that was my drug. I could walk around in that world, and I didn't deal with all the anguish and the pain. I didn't deal with my children. I only came out to go to work. And what you guys didn't realize is even going to work, I was not in this world. I would be with the Monsells. I would be with the Balkman on the bus.
You're really taking this to a whole nother level. I am lost. You would actually daydream at work?
I would daydream all the way to work. I would daydream at home. I would daydream at the table. I would daydream cooking meals.
When did it stop?
It stopped. It never really stopped because now...
So you're still daydreaming?
No, okay, let's go back. We're talking about the dark side of me.
Right.
Okay. what happened was, once more, let's go back to Christ. I was in a meeting in Newark, New Jersey, and Bishop Rice had arrived, and everybody was standing up, saying how he had blessed them through the word, and it hit me in that moment that God said, you got a choice. You can leave that world and lean on me and do real stuff, or you can stay in that world. Either way, I'm not going to leave you. And so I found myself standing up in that church that day, and I thanked him. I said, for freeing me. And to this day, it used to be automatic. You guys don't understand. I would wake up, and I wouldn't be home. I would wake up, and when you guys would lay on your bellies and watch, you thought it was hilarious. I would, and all of you, in the tapings, they'll see when we cut to those segments, not today, but that's one of the segments I have to look at. The thing you had in common, you guys called it walking, they called it, two of them said walking in the dark, and you said talking to the walls. And so what I would do was talk to the walls. But I was all these characters. I had to be at least 50 different people.
But didn't you have Christ then?
I did not, I had Christ, but my faith in what Christ was able to do for me and my belief was not there.
But you were going to church and
I was going to church. Now, when I got in church, I didn't. It was interesting. I would get into church. I would get into the Word. I would get into listening and singing and praying. But when I would leave, it was almost automatic. It was like somebody going to pick up their drum.
So could you honestly say you were into it, for it not to affect your life outside of church?
No, I'm not understanding.
When you hear the word, we all could hear it, but you don't know if you really, you can all listen, but you don't know who's heard it until it really affects and changes you. So you said you could be in church and be in the Word, but then go right back to the way you were outside.
When I would leave, I would go.
So did you really hear it, or were you just listening?
At that time, I actually believe I was in the process of growing in God, growing in faith, because I did hear the Word, I just didn't apply it. When something happened, and I was waiting, I didn't trust the world. I didn't trust the real world. The real world was a joke to me. The real world was painful.
It was a joke or scary?
Both. It was like, it's not real. It's like 911's a joke. In other words, it don't work. That's what that song means.
The real world does not work.
It didn't work for me. It didn't work for me. And I don't know if I'm explaining it right, but I'm sure there are people out there who go, you know what? Never had anyone put it like that, but that's what I do. Because I asked a few, they said, I do that too. You're not crazy. That you don't, when things get too bad, you just go somewhere else.
I've never done it, so I don't have any idea.
But it's when I thank the Lord through Bishop Rice is when I was aware that you don't have to do this. And then when I went away, I never daydreamed. Because I dealt with the real world. I fasted and I prayed and I needed God. See, when you need Him, that's what we were talking earlier. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about the need. When that's why He keeps us in constant, you're always in stuck. That's why they quote, I probably won't do it right, man born of woman is born of much trouble in few days. You're going to have a whole lot of trouble because it's the only thing that will really keep you connected. You wonder why it's just one thing after another. Because if you're always praying, you won't do what I did. And now, recently, even with this project, I had not slipped into daydreaming for a long time. I went to read all of my books. I read them because I have 3 books. And I'm reading them. The minute I put those books down, I noticed that I said, oh, God. And I knew it was a trick of the devil because he took me right back there. I could walk through my house, and I said, now, you done read the books. You're supposed to be editing these books in your head. You're supposed to be going, sitting at your computer. Now, each and every day, I would move further and further away from my work process and more into just being I could, because my therapist told me, she said, write it down. She said, instead of you daydreaming during this year, she said, you've gone through a great crisis with the loss of your daughter. She said, I want you to write down what goes on when you're on the train or when you're at work or when you're at school. And she said, write it down. When I finished writing, it was 486 pages.
Okay, so the death of Emerald was a very,
very.
You know, I can't imagine what it would be like to lose a child, and I don't want to, so I pray the Lord keeps mine. and all those children out in the world. Now, in another aspect, what would be another dark side for you?
My husband.
You say your husband. What do you mean?
My husband was the love of my life.
Okay.
He
How's
was
that
the
dark?
love of my life. The dark side of being in love with, and it was just explained to me once more spiritually, actually through an elder just the other morning, that if you don't love back, then you're in love with somebody else. Mm-hmm. And so I knew I wanted to be loved so bad that I gave every single thing. I said, you know, if I love him really hard, if I forgive everything he says, if I look beyond everything, and even though he has some problems, I see he has some problems, because it wasn't done for me. So I said, if I'm his best friend, if I listen, and I said, if I just shake him sometime and tell him, you can do better. You know, I see that you're a linguist. You know, you have a thing with languages. You can go in and you can make your way with people. You can get any job you want. I said, if I do all that and I discourage him, that's love. And he'll surely change and he'll love me back. And it seemed like the harder I loved him, the less he returned.
I have to be devil's advocate because he is past and he's not here to speak for himself. And you have painted a picture of you really being the be-all and doing everything right, that he was so just not.
That I thought was right.
Right. The picture you just painted was I loved him, I supported him, I did all these things, and he didn't love you back. Now, I wouldn't say in defense of him, but just as a devil's advocate, because, you know, we're all products of what we're taught.
Yes.
You know, and knowing the very little I know about who your husband was and who happened to be my dad, I know that no one taught him how to be a husband and no one taught him how to love. So in lieu of that, maybe he didn't interpret what you were doing as love.
I agree with you.
You know, and so
but it still doesn't, what it doesn't do is, even though we know why someone did something, mm-hmm. it still doesn't help you in the pain you feel.
Why not?
You still, because even though you can understand, and I lived through that process before I knew that, it doesn't wipe that plate, it does not wipe you clean inside. You have hurt too long.
Here we are, though.
You
again.
can forgive them.
But Christ does that. The Christ I know does that. So.
But he's God, I'm not.
No, I'm not asking you to be God. I'm asking you to do what you say you do, and that's rely on him and give it to him and let him take it away.
What I did and what I was asked to do
mm-hmm.
numerous times, no matter what your father did.
Okay.
When I went to them, they would say, Sister Briggs, forgive him and stay.
Well, it's not a them. That's what Christ asked you to do.
But that was through them. He was speaking through men.
Right, he speaks through men, yeah.
And he said to me, every time I said, I just can't, they said, yeah, you can. Sister Briggs, you can't do that. Yeah,
and
you
even
can.
Forgiving him, you still couldn't wipe it clean?
When you forgive someone, it doesn't mean that it goes away. It is still,
Wow.
you simply forgive them. When it comes up, it doesn't bother you again. But you still see it. I'm not going to tell any woman out there that you don't remember that lick somebody gave you. Yeah, you remember it. You forgive them for it, and you don't want to kill them for it. But yeah, you did hit me.
But I just tend to believe what's been preached to me and what I've learned. And forget, once you forgive somebody, God throws it in the river of forgetfulness. And you got to let it go. Because if you don't, if you remember every lick, if you remember, then you're not really forgiving. You're not letting it go.
What I'm saying is being realistic.
I'm being realistic.
Because we've been preached the same things.
Right, I'm being
realistic.
realistic.
So what I'm saying is that you can forgive somebody. I can forgive.
But you're saying I can forgive, but I won't forget, and that's
no. I don't say I won't forget. I say you don't. You won't. You cannot say that every single thing that has happened to you has been cleaned. That your memory bank in your brain is now empty. It's not.
No, I'm saying when you follow Christ, like we say we do, that if someone does something to me, then I'm supposed to forgive over and over and over again. He says 7 times, 7 times,
Right.
7. And I don't believe forgiving somebody encompasses me remembering what they did.
But it's still there, and this is one of those, and I have to be honest, I talk to people when I used to go to the rooms,
I don't
and they
know
would
what the
ask
rooms
me,
is about.
the rooms are, because your father was a drug addict, and a couple of my children are, I would go with them, and they would have a family. The family would go to a separate room, and we would sit in there, and many of those people were torn. They could not let anyone back into their lives. They could not let them in their house. They could not let them in their car, because they said, every time I look at them, I remember what they did to me.
But see, the
And I
power
forgive them.
and the
But
meaning
let
of
me-
forgiveness is to free yourself.
But
It's not
let-
to be bound.
But let me finish the thought here. The thought here is that the thought process is, I have to tell them the truth. I said, yeah. They said, well, how do you even deal with, I couldn't have nobody else. I said, because I can forgive. So it doesn't mean that when I look at that person, I don't know they stole my ring, that they stole my
We're not talking about the knowledge of something. We're talking. You
But
said
that's
it
what
hurt.
it
You were
still-
saying it hurt you.
It hurt. What hurts, it hurt when that happened. I'm not saying it still hurts me.
That's
I
what
get
was-
past there. Forgiveness gets you past there, but you still remember it. You remember the
See, the way
action.
I understand forgiveness is not so much about if you hit me and me forgiving you. It's not so much letting you off the hook. It's freeing me.
Of course.
It's allowing me to love you regardless. It's freeing.
And we're saying the same thing here, because what I'm saying to you
But
is that is
what
why-
I'm saying is forgiveness frees you from being bound to the memory of it.
But it can't. What it does
Yes,
is
it can do all
it
things.
It frees you to move on and love that person. But it does not remove the memory of what they did. It doesn't hold them accountable.
I
But
wasn't
you
talking
still
about the
remember.
knowledge of it. You said you were hurting.
No, I said I hurt during that time period. I did hurt, and I still say it. I hurt when he was doing all
No,
that.
I'm not saying during the time. What I
No,
understood
I'm
you to
not
just
saying
say.
now. Now Lance Briggs is dead. I believe that my husband died, and when he died, it paid for everything. His death paid, as we have been
Why would you believe
preached. No,
that?
because it was they said your flesh will pay for whatever it's put itself through in life.
Right.
What-
Put him
what-
through.
But with him, he and I had a clean slate. That's why y'all didn't understand how I could go on Hillsborough and get him and
But
bring
he
him
wasn't
back.
dead then.
No, but I'm saying when he lived, we had cleaned the slate. The reason he came to my house and he died that day leaving my house is because he came back. He came back to the place where he knew he was loved. He knew that lady in that house knew him and would still help him.
So you do feel like he returned the love in some.
No, he knew I loved him. I don't think Lance knew how to love.
You don't think he loved you at all through the time you were with him?
I don't. I don't.
Wow.
I really don't. Because like you said, he didn't know how. How could he give me something he didn't know how to give?
Wow.
The best thing he gave me was the love of God.
That's love.
But physical love between a man and a woman, a husband, a wife, you're going to take care of her, you're going to be there for her. He didn't know anything about that. And when I accepted all of the things that he shared with me, and he said, well, you know, this happened and that happened, I'm looking at him go, there's no way that you know. The only reason we got together is so you could pass me on to the Lord, because you really don't know how
Wow.
to love. You really don't know how important it is to be there for somebody, because nobody was ever there for you. And that's the truth. That's.
Wow. I just choose to see him in a totally different
But I think he
place.
had a totally different relationship with his children.
I don't feel like I had a close relationship. I don't feel like I knew him, but I do feel like I can respect where he came from. And once I learned and really understand that I can't hold him accountable for what he didn't know. I take what he did for me as love and receive that and let it go.
Well, let me explain. The years I spent trying to do all these things for Lance, because I felt he had an inadequacy. But when you're with someone, when you try to be everything for them, but when you see them with someone else, and they're doing exactly what you want them to do for you, but they're doing it for someone else, then at that point, They know what they're doing.
I don't know anything about what you're talking about.
What I'm saying
I'm just saying on the blanket of this conversation, on the blanket, because I don't know the ins and outs of your relationship, nor do I want to.
But what I'm saying to you, let me finish so our audience do understand, because there are women that will be saying, but I did all this stuff for him, and then when I saw him with somebody else.
Because you guys, with that, I want to address that, because you've said it more than once, that I've done all these things. And I'm a firm believer that love is relative. Like, what I believe love is for me is not always what love is for you. What love is for my husband may not be what I feel love is for me. It's a learning process. And I have to learn what makes him tick, just like, or what his sense of me loving him is, just like he has to learn what I would believe his loving me is. And a lot of times, when you love somebody, you really don't know why you love them. If you can list why you love somebody, then once they've done something out of that list, then you're out of love with them. So can you say you really love them?
I think we're kind of talking about two different things. What I'm saying is this, is that then what kind of relationship is it if you're with somebody and they don't know what makes you happy? Let's use happiness. They have no idea. Well, what kind of relationship you're going to have? That person don't even know how to make you happy. That's what you just said, that you have to learn.
You get one to the other.
You get into it. But then how did you even get together?
I don't know how y'all got together.
No, I'm talking about period.
In general.
Relationships, period. Something attracts you to a person.
Okay.
And there is no excuse after a time. If you simply don't know how to do something, and
I don't think it's fair to say there's no excuse.
No, but let me finish. Let me finish my thought. As soon as that person is consistent, that you see them, okay, every time you walk out and you'll get in a room and you just start just talking loud and acting crazy. Don't matter where you are, you do that. You say, okay, he don't know any better. That's just what he does. Say, man, why don't you tone that down? But you notice that, or they just leave their rooms a mess. Everywhere they go, their rooms are a mess, though. Not just in your house, not just in the neighbor's house, but they say, that's the messiest person. But you notice that person, when they're at your house, they leave everything messed up. And I'm just using this as a hypothetical example. But when they go to somebody else's house, they pick up, they clean up, they fold up, all this stuff. You're like, wait a minute, you're the same person, same situation, just a different person. So you have a difference of how you have a respect of persons. You know how to behave appropriately, but you choose under me for whatever reason. You choose not to do that. But when you're with someone else, or you're over there, you do everything. Nobody tells you. You say, yeah, okay, no. That's what I'm talking about.
I think it's apples and oranges, but I agree to disagree with you on this, because I think it's apples and oranges, because I don't know how, my dad was with other women. I don't have that. I didn't see him treat anybody so special or anything. I thought he was blanketly just a womanizer. I'll just be honest. I never saw him shower anybody with more. I just never saw that. I thought he really treated women pretty much the same across the board. He used them for what they wanted to use them for, and he kept it moving. And it's not like it's a positive thing. It's just true. That's what it was, and it's painful, and but that's just who he was, and that's what he was taught, and that's what he learned. But there was also another side to him, and I choose to stay in that side. And that was the side where he would go to church. He would, when he had it together. But it's not even about so much all of that. It's more so, I just tend to believe that I have so many faults of my own, so many of my own, that I don't even share with people, that God does not reveal. Like I remember saying to someone, I think it was you, that my dad had a lot of more visible sins than anybody I ever knew. That means whatever he did was on broadcast, so everybody got to see him screw up. But what about those of us who, we do our junk, but nobody sees it? So it's easy for us to say, oh, he's a screw up, but we're not telling people that really, inside of me, I'm screwed up too. I've messed up. So I refrain from doing that to people, because I know in me, I'm not perfect. I'm far from perfect. No one is perfect. There was only one, and look what they did to him. You know, so none of us are perfect. There are excuses. There are situations where people just don't know any better. Or even if they know better, there's something wrong with them where they don't click and say, I should do better. There's something mentally wrong there. It's not just, they're just horrible people. There's something wrong with them. You know, and I really felt that there was something wrong with him. You said yourself he was a Vietnam vet. Before you even got with him, he had done, what, 2 tours of duty? 3. So he had issues, you know, that we didn't even know about. So when I think about him and when I think about the way you were with him, you loved him. You loved him earnestly. You loved him the way you were taught to love. And I respected you for it. I thanked you for not changing it because of who you are. If you had done it any other way, it wouldn't have been you. Because he didn't receive it, did it make it any more pure? No. Because he didn't show you that he received it, did it make it any more true? No. He didn't know how. He didn't know how to compute it. He didn't know how to...
I agree with that.
He didn't even know how to receive it. You know, he didn't know how to receive it.
Didn't.
I mean, material things come and go. I'm talking about emotional, really supportive love, where someone is there for you, come or go. He didn't know nothing. He didn't know anything about that. Regardless, you could be there for him. You could pick him up off the corner 150 times. He didn't understand that that's support.
I agree with that, but going back to our initial question of why it is still painful, it still doesn't make it any less painful.
My question is, why is it still painful? He's been in the ground a
I'm
while.
not talking about now.
Right.
Lance has been dead for 8 years, and I've gotten along just fine.
Right.
And in fact, one of the things that you guys seem to not everybody, but when I say now I am ready to move on, I'm ready to be, and I'm too, and that's when I get back to that moment, just bringing it back, and so our audience watching today understand this, what's going back and forth with us is daughters and mothers, because you are my daughter.
Well, I'm simply having a conversation with you.
And that's what I want them to understand. That's what happened to
That's
that
the name
host?
of the show. It's a conversation with my daughter.
And they go, what happened to that host? She just went off. Like, no,
I don't feel like went off. We're having a conversation.
I'm saying I just want to bring it back around. Anyway, they'll bring it back to that point of when I said the darkest moment was when I discovered the light. Is that, number one, what I really discovered, and when he was sick, and I said, you know, it's okay. He's almost dead then. And then he died.
Mike, when you discovered he was sick, he was almost...
No. When I discovered, I'm mixing up things here. The dark moment, when I said the darkest moment, was when I actually saw the light.
Right.
It's because that's when you realize how dark it was. And you're out of it, and you're like, I'm 53, and this man that I've been married to for 33 years is very sick, and he didn't realize how sick he was, unless of course it was his way of always fighting things, is just not to give in. And then I'm looking at that time my mom had just died, and she had died at my house, and you're like, did I do everything I was supposed to do with her? You start saying, I should have went in there the day she was calling me, and then she dies, and then Lance dies, and all these people are dying. And
they graduated.
Well, okay, but they died.
They passed on.
They went on to life. But in the real sense, I'm saying that because
it is the real sense.
But I'm saying everyone out there does not know the truth. So when I say they died,
the truth is they passed on to another better place. The truth is that you don't die. This is not the end. The truth is you pass on.
Well, we believe, so if there are any Muslims or anybody, women out there listening.
I'm sure you all don't believe that this is it.
Some of them do.
Well, if you do, there's hope. There's hope to know that there's something more than this.
My belief and faith is that my husband, of course, went on, and I even called to be sure because of all that he had done, and I got a recording that's saying, I got the word back that he had indeed been accepted. In other words, we believe that when you pass, you know that you go on to a better place, and I want to be sure of that with him because of all the things that he and I had shared. But as far as myself, as far as the pain of those years of going through, the pain of Emerald's death, the pain of all that stuff does resound in you. I
What do you mean by resound?
Resound. When Emmy's, I never ever, on her birthday, over the years, I would almost forget November 2nd. Look, her father never did.